Okay, guys, here's example 1 and example 2 from page 2. Just a deeper dive into what we've been talking about. I don't think it's deeper, but let's just dive in here. So, the instructions. Read the instructions carefully. What are the domain? Remember, that's my x value, and that means how far left, because this is my x-axis right here, and how far right, because the x-axis just continues forever and ever and ever, and so does, both right and left. So the real question is, how far left does it go, and how far right does it go? We don't care about up and down right now, because that's range. So it says write the domain, how far left it goes, and how far right it goes. It says in set builder notation and interval notation. I'm not going to worry about this so much. Because remember in my pre-lesson, we talked about if there are a bunch of dots, then we would use set notation. But this is interval notation. I can tell that this graph always continues because of that arrow. It will continue to get wider and wider and wider if we continue drawing this. Again, we're not talking about up, even though the arrows are pointing in the up direction. We're wondering how far left does it go? Well, because of that arrow, it never ends. So how wide does it get? Well, over here is negative infinity. It never stops. So my left wall is negative infinity. Now the question is, should I use a bracket or parentheses? Mathematically speaking, the idea is that you'll never reach infinity. That's deep and philosophical. Buzz Lightyear disagrees. He says to infinity and beyond. But Buzz Lightyear didn't write math, so we got to go with what math says. We got to use parentheses because math says you can't get there. You can disagree with that. Now, comma, how far right does it go? Again, because of the arrow, we're not talking up. We're wondering how wide. That's what domain is. How far left, how far right. So ignore the upness, think to the right. Well, because it continues forever and ever, it'll never end in the positive x direction because infinity is over here. So right here, that's my domain answer in interval notation. Okay, but it also asks us to find the range. Don't forget what range is. That's my y value. Don't forget what the y is. That's my y-axis. So the question is, and you always start with how low it goes. If we think of this graph and think of temperature maybe, it goes down to 0. So, and it includes 0. So that's going to be a bracket 0. And then the y, the other part of y is how high does it go? Well, both of these continue up and up and up and up and up and up and up forever and ever because positive infinity is up. So we're going to go like that. Sticking with the math rules, we're going to put a parentheses in there saying it can't reach it. All right. Now, how did I get this graph? Well, I went to Desmos and used Desmos, and that's in the pre-lesson. So go to Desmos.com if you want to type that in, but also take a look at my video on how to use Desmos, okay? So again, I took Desmos.com, typed this exact thing in, this was the result, and I listed these important values. Now notice, it does not ask us find the x-intercepts. It does not ask us find the y-intercepts. I put them there because sometimes you're going to be asked for them and sometimes you're not. So we're going to have to ignore these because look what the question wants. What's the domain? Well, again, this isn't, look at this one. It's getting wide fast. This is going to take a longer time, but if we're talking how far left does it go, it'll continue to get wider and wider and wider the further down we go. So how far left does it go? Again, the domain for this one, negative infinity. How far right does it go? In other words, if we continued going down, 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 notice I'm saying down. I don't want you to think down. I want you to think wide. How far out the x-axis will it go? Well, it'll go to positive infinity. It'll just continue moving slowly wider to the right as this graph goes down, down, down. All right, what's the range? Well, again, range is how low does it go? Well, both directions are going to go down forever. So we start with the lowest value, negative infinity. How high does it go? Well, it goes exactly, is it 1.5 or is it 4.5? Well, because this is my y value, that's telling me how high it went. So it's 4.5, and it gets there. So we got to use a bracket. Okay, let's move on to this. Notice the instructions are different. Find the x and the y intercepts. Now, if we were going to be mathy math, and we wanted to find the x-intercepts, remember I told you in the pre-lesson, you have to let y equal 0. In other words, you go to this, and we haven't said this yet, but g of x is just a fancy way of saying y. So this is y equals 4 minus x squared. So we're going to take that, y equals 4 minus x squared. By the way, this could be g of x, h of x, I of x. Doesn't matter. Your brain should go, I'm going to replace that with y. So if I let y equal 0 and I plug it in, 4 minus x squared, and I subtract 4 from both sides, and I get negative 4 equals negative x squared. Now if I multiply both sides by negative 1, I'll just do my work over here. I would get 4 equals x squared. Now the way I teach it is I teach my students to go bada boom, bada bing, do the right thing. And then we're going to end up getting plus or minus 2. Now these are my x-intercepts when y equals 0. So these are two answers. So I get 2, 0, and I get negative 2, 0. Now if we want to cheat and look at what Desmos did for us, it would give us this graph, and then we could just hang our cursor right over there, and it would give us negative 2, 0. Hang our cursor right over there, it'd give us 2, 0. But if we don't have access to Desmos, like you're on a test, and graphing calculators are not allowed, or you can't access Desmos.com, you have to use MathyMath. So don't just get stuck in one way of doing things. All right, now we got to find the y-intercept. Well, remember, to find the y-intercept, a line here, the y-intercept, we have to let x equals 0. Well, this one's pretty easy. So if I go to that original equation, y equals 4 minus x squared, and I let x equal 0, that just eliminates this. That would look like y equals 4 minus 0, which is just y equals 4. And as you can see, our y-intercept is 0. Remember, x is 0. That's what comes first. And then y equals 4. So that's the mathy math of doing it. Remember, to find your y-intercept, you got to let x equal 0. To find your x-intercept, you got to let y equal 0. You'll get used to it. Might be new to you now, but you'll get used to it. And then if you went to Desmos, it just verifies all of our findings. And there you go. I'm just going to skip this just to save some time, okay?